Hey everyone, today we're going to discuss which killers and survivors would be rivals within the realm. I thought I should finally address this comment I've been getting for quite a while now. For this, it's going to mainly be rivalries instigated by the killer, mostly based on survivors who remind them of their own past. Typically, there's no reason really for the survivors to hate a certain killer in particular. They probably just hate all of them really, with a few exceptions. Especially as most of the survivors didn't know their killer from their chapter before the realm. From this, however, I imagine a rivalry could grow between survivor and killer. Or maybe they could see each other as enemies or each other's nemesis. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Let's get into it. Starting out with Trapper, I honestly think he would have a rivalry with one of the tougher appearing characters, like David or Chris. I don't want to reduce these two to just being tough guys, because they're more than that. David in particular though is shown to be very violent, and often not in particularly moral ways. David's often brutal solutions to problems may remind Evan of his father and the hatred he had for him, and generally just the emotional influence over him. David even holds a kind of similar resemblance to Archie Macmillan, and even in a way, a younger Evan. I'm looking at the haircut mainly. So, Trapper could look at David and become angry, almost like looking at a younger version of himself, seeing the violent tendencies, and reminding him of his past. Evan kind of hates what he's become, so seeing David may anger him. David probably wouldn't be against the challenge either, he's known to take on larger opponents. For Wraith, I thought maybe someone like Yun-Jin, mainly due to her being the most implicated in the Trickster's murders. She sees them happening and she doesn't act on it, for her own self-preservation. This is something I could see reminding Wraith of Azerov and Autohaven Wreckers. In a similar way to Yun-Jin, he saw that Azerov was up to something, but didn't investigate further or take action on it. So again, Yun-Jin may remind him of himself in a way, and how he too ignored the obvious wrongdoings of Azerov, like Yun-Jin did with the Trickster, making him resent her possibly, for reminding him of his own inaction. Hillbilly is a tough one. There's not really any survivor who could reasonably be compared to Billy's parents, as they were despicable people, and even our most morally grey survivors aren't as bad as them. As Billy's only interactions with police have been bad ones, with the corrupt sheriff and his deputies, it's likely any of the law enforcement characters would remind Billy of the sheriff, even if they don't share his qualities. He could simply see their badges and associate them with it. So for a rivalry, maybe characters like Leon, Jill, and Tap. Nurse is another quite tough one. My best idea though for a rivalry is that Nurse wouldn't like the other Nurse characters, such as Lisa. Seeing someone like Lisa in her nurse outfit, which is actually incredibly similar to her own in Crotus Pren, may remind her of her days in Crotus Pren and make her angry. Lisa may also hate seeing the nurse, what with her looking so similar to the nurses of Silent Hill, that Lisa could have ended up like. So they're both reminded of bad places by looking at one another basically, which may spark a rivalry. Shape, although being an emotionless husk, would probably just be the most focused on Laurie. She managed to escape him in 1978, and both of their perks suggest that they do have a form of rivalry. Laurie's perk, Object of Obsession, suggests that Myers is indeed obsessed with Laurie. Laurie also has a hatred for Myers, after he killed her friends, and threatened her own life. Hag, I believe, would actually dislike her respective chapter character, Ace. Lisa used the hexes to get extra luck to pass her school tests, and essentially made this dangerous trade-off using the hexes in order to improve her grades. Ace on the other hand has a natural luck to him, something that Lisa would probably be jealous of. He didn't need to use the hexes, he's simply lucky. Maybe someone like Ash too, who has a similar dumb luck to him. Doctor, I think, would have a rivalry with Adam. I believe this simply for Adam being the closest Doctor has to an academic peer on the survivor side, being highly educated and intelligent, and even wearing similar attire to Doctor, with his white coat. Doctor was always trying to outdo his co-workers and prove his greater intelligence. Adam is also very by the book, compared to Herman's complete opposite attitude. I think in this case, Adam would truly despise the Doctor back, more so than the other killers do. So definitely a rivalry here, I think. Huntress, I think, would probably dislike Bill the most, mostly just for what he's wearing with his army-like outfit. When soldiers entered into the Red Forest, Anna got very angry, so the sight of a soldier in the realm would probably remind her of that. She kind of just fights everyone, but I believe a soldier would be the most likely to anger her. Cannibal, I believe, is a character who wouldn't hate any survivor in particular. In the films, he kind of just dislikes anyone who comes into his land or house. I think the ones he may dislike the most, though, are pretty much any of the younger characters, who would remind him of the events of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and those similar-aged people who managed to overcome him, with one even escaping, which Bubba worries will lead to his family's arrest. Possibly someone like Kate, as she was potentially based on Texas Chainsaw's Sally Herdesty, the sole survivor of the massacre. Nightmare, I think Quentin. They already have a history, with Quentin being directly involved in his quote-unquote death in the 2010 film. Just before being taken into the realm, Freddy was literally planning on finding Quentin and killing him as revenge, before the entity took them both. And again, in this case, Quentin definitely hates Freddy, so the rivalry would come more easily, I guess. Pig is another kinda tricky one. I thought possibly, as she believes she is doing Jigsaw's bidding in the realm, she may try to find guilty people in the trials. So maybe characters like Nia or Yunjin, who caused or allowed murders to happen, which could have otherwise been avoided. Both of them never really owning up to their mistakes. That's the best idea I have for that one, and even that's a push. Clown I thought might simply dislike some of the more intelligent characters, like Jonah, Elodie, Serena, and Adam maybe. Clown is said to be quite sloppy in his lore, with people escaping his bindings on multiple occasions. I think the most intelligent characters would easily pick up on his sloppiness, and be able to use it to their favor, to outmaneuver him, which he wouldn't like basically. So I think any one of these characters he could start a rivalry with. Spirit is a really tough one, due to her innocence mainly, and lack of any dislike really prior to the realm. It's possible from their rough looks alone, characters like David or Bill may remind her of her father. Even if those characters aren't like him, they may simply remind her of him regardless. Maybe someone like Jeff even could trigger this kind of reaction too. It's possible that with the entity's manipulation, she does see all the survivors as her father, or some of them at least. So I reckon the tougher looking characters would remind her of her father, and also her school peers who would bully her and call her names. She could be reminded of them by any of the younger characters maybe. Legion I believe would simply dislike any of the law enforcement characters, so Leon, Tap, Bill, Jill, Chris, etc. Or potentially one of the teachers like Adam and Yuichi. In their tome lore, both Frank and Julie agree that education is a waste of time and basically brainwashing. So yeah, they probably aren't the biggest fans of the teacher characters, with Adam and Yuichi. On the flip side, Yuichi and Adam may not dislike the Legion, but probably look at them almost like unruly students. Plague is a really tricky one I feel. However, I thought due to her loyalty to the entity, her rivalry could spark with one of the characters who have escaped or evaded the entity. The survivor characters who have somehow outdone or survived it would bother her, with her being intensely loyal to it. Elodie, Kate, Michaela, and Felix have all evaded or escaped the entity at some point. So as long as Adiris knows about this, I would say them, or one of them at least. For Ghostface, I thought possibly one of the hyper-dedicated detective types, like Tap or Serena, maybe to a lesser extent Nancy and Jonathan. Tap and Serena as characters focus on a case until it is cracked, and are dedicated to seeking justice. For a character like Ghostface, that's a scary person to be hunted by, and someone who could eventually even pin him down. As meticulous as Ghosty is, if there's someone with a similar eye for detail hunting him, he isn't going to seem so meticulous anymore. I also think these rivalries will go both ways. Ghostface's meticulous nature and ability to not be found for so long would definitely spark the interest of Serena and Tap. Demogorgon I don't believe really has any anger in the human sense, so I just kind of decided probably Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan. If it's the demo from season 1, then probably more so someone like Steve, as I believe when he fought back, he used his nailed baseball bat, and was more direct with his attacks, which the demo might remember. Only I thought possibly someone like Felix or Jake. My reasoning isn't the best on this, but both of these characters turned their backs on their family to an extent. Felix stopped looking for his parents after they were taken by the entity, and Jake left his family behind for a life of solitude in the woods. The idea of leaving family, or not continuing on their legacy, would be a thing that the Oni wouldn't like. With him being so family oriented, to the point of murdering thousands. So I think some kind of rivalry would appear there. Almost a difference in values. Deathslinger I thought could be kind of annoyed with Ash. Ash has a carefree nature and reliance on luck, and his role as the Chosen One, and also has a fully functioning mechanical hand. The idea of someone like that, having that kind of technology, without creating it also, would probably annoy him. It was of course Pablo's doing. This may anger him further, potentially believing Ash stole the technology, much like Caleb's own inventions were stolen, which he very much did not like. Executioner, it seemed like the obvious pick would be James Sunderland. However, it's stated in his lore that Pyramid Head has completed his duty when it comes to James, meaning he's moved on from him. Therefore, I believe he would likely be more drawn to some of the more guilty survivors like Yunjin, who knew of Trickster's murders but didn't act on them. Maybe someone like Ash, who could feel guilt over opening the Necronomicon and leaving his apocalypse-esque world behind. Possibly Nia for killing the mayor, or Dwight for spiking his boss's drink with hallucinogens. Someone with a degree of guilt basically, who kind of fits Executioner's mold to repent for something. Blight, I believe, would likely dislike the survivor characters who possibly rival his power or skill in the realm, a bit like Doctor. Potentially Michaela with her boon magic may intimidate Blight's own serums, or maybe a better opponent would be Claudette, with her botany skill. Claudette and Blight may be rivals, with Blight creating deadly serums to make the user more powerful, where Claudette creates tinctures for healing and recovery. They each have a very opposing use of botany, or science really, and could dislike the other for that. Twins is another character who I don't think would really have a direct hatred for any survivor. I thought possibly Jake. Jake is a character who was born to a rich family, but decides instead to spend his time in the woods, alone. This may annoy the twins, who were in a similar situation, but were forced to go on the run and live alone as they were being hunted. The twins wouldn't know Jake's full story, but at face value might not like that he chose a life of living out in the woods, when he didn't have to. That's the best idea I've got. Again, none of the survivors really share any traits with the people who hunted the twins, like the Black Veil or Witch Hunters. Trickster I don't believe would hate Yunjin the most out of the survivors. I thought instead maybe someone like Fang. Both of these characters have reached a level of fame, and both now in the realm have a dedication for doing well in the trials. Trickster appears to love the trials, and treats them like a game, and Fang desires to prove herself in the trials, and treats them like a game too. I think that would make an interesting competitive clash between the two, and spark a rivalry. Nemesis of course would have a rivalry with STARS members, Jill and Chris. Despite him seemingly moving on to a larger range of targets in the realm, he still only says the word STARS, showing he's not quite over them escaping just yet. In this case, the survivor likely does hate the killer too. Jill in particular has a score to settle with Nemesis, and most definitely hates him, more so than the other killers. Cenobite I was pretty unsure about, but eventually I concluded Elodie. My reasoning behind this is that in Hellraiser, the Cenobites get pretty irked about the idea of someone escaping them, upon hearing from Kirsty that Frank Cotton has escaped their realm. Elodie is a character who not only escaped the entity's grasp, but has also had close calls with the Black Veil, and is generally just one of the best examples of a character managing to avoid the supernatural, despite actively hunting it. I think that would annoy him. Artist, a bit like Spirit, I believe doesn't have any obvious survivor rival. If anything, she would probably get on with more of the survivors, like Nia with her rebellious art, or Jeff who uses his art to express emotions too. My best idea for any form of rivalry would be between herself and potentially Michaela. She could mistake her witch appearance to be similar to that of the Black Veil cult members, who cut her tongue and hands, and kidnapped her and her friends. The Black Veil also seemed to chant and use some kind of ritualistic magic before doing so, making Michaela's own boon magic possibly remind Kamina of the Black Veil and what they did. Onryō, I think probably just Yoichi. As a child, Yoichi essentially escaped Sadako and the curse, so him being in the realm kind of gives her the chance to complete the promise of the curse, as messed up as that sounds. She killed both of Yoichi's parents, Raiko and Ryuji, and Yoichi is still haunted by her into his adulthood. He too, in this case, likely hates Sadako, particularly after the events of his lore, where his students go missing to her. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own thoughts on these different rivalries down below. Thanks, and goodbye. Bye.